If you like this story, hit the like button and please subscribe. I will try to make a new story each week. Help support the channel with Patreon. Monster Hunter John. Story 2, Bayou Bigfoot. Louisiana. Belkent said, what was happening in the world of Cajuns and crayfish? Here I was, sitting in a hotel in Houma, Louisiana, looking over my packet of information provided from Kent. I remember, just after my first hunt, that I saw Kent in his office just finishing a video call. How about Louisiana? He asked. That's how it started. The Louisiana branch of MRE had contacted our office to speak to Kent about something going on down here. Apparently, Kent was important in the hierarchy of the company. Exactly what, I had yet to find out. There was a report about 8 missing campers. 6 in one group and 2 in another a few days later. Then, a rescue party of 30 people was sent out. 3 did not come back. Of all the people, only 3 bodies were found. One of the original 6 and 2 from the searchers. The bodies were torn to pieces, as though something incredibly strong just ripped them apart. I had the background of all the people that had died and the autopsy for the 3 found. There were also several reports of Bigfoot sightings in the area. Since I had the data myself, I wanted to read through the reports carefully. I would meet the MRE agent tomorrow when he drove down from Baton Rouge. The first file I opened was about the first 6 campers. They had left at a point on Lake Duquesne in 3 rental kayaks. They were to head west and land, then start hiking, camping here and there, and come back in 4 days. 3 men, 3 women. After day 5, the rental place called the police and reported that they were late. Unfortunately, they had already rented a kayak for 2 others. They were supposed to be back the next day. So the police had 2 groups to look for. After the first day of looking, the police called for searchers to help. The 6th day, the campground for the original 6 was found a mile in and at the edge of stream. 3 tents were in shreds. The central campfire was scattered. One of the original campers was found, or what was left of him. An arm, a leg, and the upper portion of his chest and head. Reading the autopsy, the body was subjected to tremendous force. One of the deputies had found it at the base of a cypress tree that was about 3 feet into the bayou. Based on the evidence, there was a large blood spot on the cypress about 3 feet above the waterline. So it appeared that something had thrown the body against the tree before tearing it apart. The remains did not show that they had been cut, nor did they show that they had been done by a typical alligator. Rather, they had been pulled apart. There were tracks, but none clear enough to show what had happened. There was a bloody print on one tent that may have been from a victim. It was impossible to tell. One of the searchers, a game warden, said that the entire scene looked like some crazed bear had done it. Yet, none could explain the missing 5 bodies. A bear, no matter how crazed, was unlikely to have killed all 6 people. By the evening, everyone was supposed to meet back. 3 of the searchers did not. Figuring they might have gotten lost, the police let everyone go home that wanted to, and they waited. Come morning, the searchers went out again. About half a day went by before the 2 were discovered, not too far from where the 6 campers had met their fate. Both had been killed in the same area. Alligator attack was out of the question. This was a piece of dry land far enough away from the bayou that no alligator would venture into. Both were torn apart, but were pretty much whole. Throats ripped out, chest ripped open, an arm torn off. They had bite marks on them, but nothing identifiable other than not an alligator attack. Again, the warden that was with them suggested a bear. The problem was there were not enough claw marks on the bodies to be bear. What claw marks were there showed a shortened claw on one side, and then 4 longer ones like a hand. Bear claws were together, all 5 toes. Still, this was the best that the police could come up with. That is why this hit MRE to start with. In Louisiana and the Bayou, alligator attacks were not uncommon. Someone getting killed, not uncommon, but it did happen. Alligator killing and then eating someone, very rare, but then again, it did happen. These are close to a bear attack, but not quite right. There were bears in the area, black bears, but they were not known to go after people unless they threatened their cubs. This wasn't cub season and still did not explain what happened to the first six. Two people I could see. One is attacked, the other person tries to get the bear off and gets attacked. But basically, we had 8 bodies missing. Bears did not steal bodies. There were also reports to the MRE, not police reports, about a Bigfoot being seen in the area. 8 people had said that they saw a huge, hairy thing lurking about. That is what got the MRE interested in me having a half day with Kent explaining Bigfoot. Kent had a nice slideshow prepared. Sasquatch, Bigfoot, Skookum, Chiatanka, Ninapa, whatever you call them all, represent the same species. Skunk apes in Florida are different, but we'll get to them later. Big feet are real. There are a few thousand wandering about in the forests of the U.S., some in Alaska, but most of those are a different subspecies. You're not going to get too technical here, are you? I asked. I barely passed high school biology. Kent laughed at that. Okay, the basics. Bigfoot is a descendant of Paranthropus boisei, one of the pre-hominids that lived in Africa about 1.5 million years ago. Its fossil record vanished because it moved from Africa up into Asia and eventually crossed the land bridge between Alaska and the Soviet Union several thousand years ago. The common thought is that Bigfoot is a descendant from the giant ape, Gigantopithecus blacki, in China, but they were a completely different species and one that is extinct. Kent, I said, the history lesson is nice, but tells me nothing useful. Sorry, I'm somewhat used to giving this speech to a more educated group, he said with a slight laugh. He pointed to the TV. Bigfoot is no slouch. Averages 600 pounds and 7 feet in height. Now that is an average. There are some individuals that are about human sized, others that top out at 1,000 pounds and stand almost 10 feet tall. Some maybe even larger. Footprints average about 24 inches by 8 inches. Again, some smaller, some bigger. They are semi-intelligent. For example, they have a language, though not much of one, and they bury their dead. They usually form a loose family unit, though many are lone individuals just try to live and not be seen by we humans. Normally, they eat the same thing as bears. Berries, nuts, leaves, fish, insects. They occasionally catch deer, elk, rabbit, and squirrel, basically whatever they can. On very rare occasions, when they are near humans, they prey on chickens, goats, dogs, even cows. They are an advantageous group. The TV screen had been showing pictures of big, hairy creatures through woods and fields. Some trail cam photos, some home security cameras. As far as killing people, Kent paused for a minute. Well, we have reports of campers disappearing, hikers gone missing. Even native tribes claim to have had women stolen from their camp. Proof? Not really any. Could just be lost people, bear attacks, cougar attacks, hell, might even be some giant raccoon. Then why are we investigating this one? The attacks and missing people are fact. 3 bodies recovered. They say bear, and I say bull. The only native bears are black bears. They don't attack and kill 6 campers and then carry away 5 bodies. There have been some credible Sasquatch sightings in the area. They are strong enough to do the damage done. They don't do this. It's not their normal behavior. Kent stood up and paced the office. I think there is something else going on down there. I need someone to go check it out. No local investigators? Yes. In fact, I will have a field agent meet you down there. Thing is, we are fewer in number down there, and most of the ones there have other assignments. I thought you might like to go, since it's not dealing with vampires. Kent smiled. I nodded. The whole vampire thing still had me rattled. Okay, I'll have some fried catfish while there. Kent laughed and slapped me on the back. There you go. Now, before you head off, you need to practice with something bigger than that 9mm that you have. Shoot a Sasquatch with that, and you'll only make it mad. I know you're good on the shotgun. How are you with a high-powered rifle? So I loaded up one of the company's trucks with a six-wheeled swamp buggy on a trailer, a couple of cans of extra gasoline, a 44 Magnum automatic on my side, and a 458 Winchester Magnum rifle. I still had my little 9mm on my ankle, but I was packing for bear this time, or rather packing for Bigfoot. After a good night's sleep, I ate breakfast and waited for the Louisiana investigator to show up. Bill Sharon was to meet me at 9. He was 10 minutes early. Bill pulled up in a beat-up pickup, and I wondered what he spent his money on. MRE wasn't paying us millions, but it was far more than I used to make. He was dressed in a dirty t-shirt, muddy jeans, and boots. Couldn't this guy afford something decent? Did this guy actually work for us? He stepped out and offered me a hand. Bill Sharon. You must be John. I took the hand and nodded. Good to meet you. Same. Not often I get to meet out-of-towners. You an expert on Sasquatch? No, I said plainly. That's what I learned before coming down. I'm fairly new to all of this. I hunted one vampire, and that has been it. I wanted to do something other than vampires, so I was sent here. Bill nodded. So Kent sent you down? Yes, I said, surprised. You know him? Kent? Yes. Most MRE people do. So, what did he give you as far as information? Just a briefing on what happened. I have the autopsy reports on the 3 bodies that were found. Some names of the people that say they saw Bigfoot, but that's about all. I haven't tracked down anyone yet to question them. Okay, well, I've already contacted the local sheriff, and we're okay with him. Well, let's say more like, we are tolerated by him. This isn't exactly his jurisdiction, so we're kind of slipping in with him on this. I've also talked to Fish and Game. We're cleared there as well, though reluctantly. Seems I don't think much of us helping to chase down some rogue bear. I have called the witnesses of the supposed Sasquatch sightings. 3 I have marked out as unimportant. Seems that the main witness we need to track down goes by the name of Cajun Charlie. Got an address? Bill pulled out a piece of paper from his shirt pocket. Right here. I unfolded the sheet and could barely understand where it led to. Towards the end, the directions were turn at the big cypress, go to the blue house, turn right, etc. You think you can find this place? Sure. I know it's not as direct as you're used to, but here in the bayou, not a problem. Mine or yours? Bill smiled. You be an outer towner, ain't ya? He said with a distinct accent. One of them their reporters that don't believe nothing? I nodded as I laughed. Okay, you drive. What about the trailer and swamp buggy? Yeah, we can take it, Bill said, but we'll have to stop somewhere and make the buggy presentable. I had no idea what he meant by that, but I agreed. We unlatched the trailer from my truck and put on his. I put the rifle and a handful of shells in his truck. At this, Bill asked about storage in the buggy. There was a small storage trunk, and Bill suggested putting the rifle back there. We need to present ourselves as fairly local people. A brand new rifle like that is not going to do. Same with your fancy pistol. Understood. These people would deal with someone local, or at least somewhat local, better than someone from another state or big city. As such, I took his advice and stored my pistol and rifle in the back. We took off from there, heading for I have no clue. After about a half hour, Bill pulled over on the side of the road along part of the bayou. I was wondering what he was doing when he stepped out and grabbed a bucket from the back of the truck and walked over to the water. I stepped out and watched as he gathered up a bucket of mud and water. He walked up to the buggy and emptied his bucket on the side. He continued to do this until the buggy looked as if it had been running through the swamp itself. He then took a bucket and threw it on me. "There," he said as I scraped mud off me. "No, you look like you've been trudging through the swamp." Of course, he already looked the part. "I was wondering why you were dressed so." "Dirty?" "Yeah, these are my hand-me-downs for when I go local. Did you think I dressed like this?" Well, I admitted I had wondered. Bill just smiled, putting his bucket back in the truck bed and climbing in. "Cajun Charlie is about another 20 minutes. Tell me, what kind of equipment do you have?" "Nothing but the guns here," I answered. "At the hotel, I have several trail cams and some perimeter alarms and a couple of night scopes." "Then we'll go back before we do very much investigating," he said, driving. "We'll do introductions today, a quick look around, and then head back for the hotel for the night. Get a fresh start in the morning." After several turns and trips down one lane, unpaved roads, we pulled up next to what looked to me a half-fallen-in shack. Bill parked on the side of the road. "This should be Cajun Charlie's." We got out, and Bill went up to the door and knocked. We waited, no answer. Bill knocked again. "Cajun Charlie? We're here about your Bigfoot sighting." Still no answer. We walked around the back. The house backed up to the bayou. A wooden dock, which had seen better days, stretched into the water with a small boat tied up. The back of the house was a roof porch. Bill walked up to the back door and knocked. "Cajun Charlie?" The screen door creaked open and a double-barrel shotgun poked through. "What you be wanting?" I'm Bill. This is my friend John. We're trying to track down people that have reported seeing something in the woods. You're the last person on our list to having seen something." Actually, he was the first on our list, but I didn't say anything about that. "That's right. We're just trying to find out what people saw. They say it was a Bigfoot. Some say it was a swamp monster." The shotgun did not waver, but came out the door further as a man stepped out. I saw it twice. The gun lowered. "I saw it 5 days ago, and just yesterday." He pointed across the bayou, down around the corner over there. "Seen it in the woods walking around. Gonna put some buckshot in its furry ass and come around here." "Around the corner?" Bill asked. "You mind if we unload the swamp buggy and go have a look?" "Hell no. I'm even come with you and show you." "And how far is it from where the camper disappeared?" I asked. "Not that far. Probably a mile or so. Still taped off by the police." Charlie paused for a second. "Be faster if I took you in my boat." Bill and I looked at each other. "Well," Bill finally said, "we may want to look around a little bit." Charlie shrugged. "Nothing to do all day." Bill looked at me and shrugged. Finally, he motioned to Charlie. "Fine with us." We loaded onto the small boat. I was somewhat concerned, as the brown water was only inches from coming over the edge of the boat. The motor was started, and we cut through the bayou on a slow but steady speed. Although Ken had me drive the buggy at headquarters, we were not able to try it in the water. Still, I believe we were making better speed in Charlie's boat. We slowly made our way around the distant point and headed toward the shore. Cypress trees lined the bank, and I was afraid that we would have no place to pull up on shore. However, Charlie found a place, and we slid onto the bank. After we climbed out, Charlie pulled the boat up on shore. I was fishing when I seen it both times. This is where I saw it the other day. They were walking among the trees up there. He pointed about 10 yards inland. It was dark. I figured about 8 feet tall or so. We walked into where Charlie was indicating. It was just slowly walking like it didn't have nothing to do. Both Bill and I looked over the ground, splitting up and slowly walking around. I was the first to see it, a human-looking footprint only big. As in 2 feet big, over here. The other two came over as I started to follow a line of tracks. Here, I said, they appear to come from deeper in the woods, up to here, and then back into the woods there. Clear footprints. I knelt down to trace one print. Looking carefully, I could see that the prints differed slightly. Toes spread out a bit, where it was wet, closer together were dry. These definitely were not fake. Well, this proves that we have a Sasquatch in the area, Bill commented. If we find these prints or the campers disappeared, that is somewhat conclusive. This isn't what Kent led me to believe. It was obvious that Sasquatch had been here, but responsible for the deaths of all of the campers. I didn't say anything to Bill, but I suddenly had the feeling that there was more to this than a roaming Sasquatch. We would talk when we got back to the hotel room. Back into the boat, and a 20-minute ride led us to a yellow taped area. The police strip was tied from tree to tree over a 50-foot area. We slid into the bank, and again, Charlie pulled the boat up enough so that it did not float away. The first campsite is about a half mile in. The other is maybe 100 yards. You may be able to see the tape through the trees. And the missing searchers? I asked. I reckon they were at the main campsite. No one's sure. We headed for the second camp area. It was marked off by yellow tape. The tents were gone, of course, evidence, but where they had their campfire was still visible. Just a small pile of ash. They probably meant for it to provide light and enough to roast some hot dogs. Bill and I looked around the campsite while Charlie stood nearby, somewhat disinterested. We saw where there had been some blood on the ground, but no footprints. Of course, this was a drier area. The second campsite was not much different. The campfire had been bigger. There was more blood spots. I looked over the trees that bordered the bayou and saw one with a large brown spot. Guess this is the tree where they found the one body, I told Bill. He agreed as we kept looking. Finally, Bill called me over to a moist area. Look, he said as he dropped to one knee. There in the mud was a footprint. But it wasn't the big print as before. This one was smaller. It was five-toed, but looked different, almost like a paw. Bigger than a dog print, and I imagine bigger than any coyote or wolf. It was human-sized. What the hell makes that kind of print? I asked. Then I saw another a couple of feet away, a partial print where it looked like whatever made it had slipped a little in the mud. We both stood up, but said nothing else. We walked back to where Charlie was standing. We could go now, Bill said. Looks like we need to come back tomorrow with our gear and camp out a few days. You're going to camp out? He asked here. Bill looked at me and then back to Charlie. Yep, this is where whatever happened started. Maybe if we came here, we'll find out why. Once back at Charlie's house, Bill asked about parking the truck and trailer somewhere for a few days. Charlie told us that we could park anywhere along the road. The next house was a mile or so away, and the rest of the road was open. Bill nodded. We both shook his hand and drove back to town. We're dealing with more than just a Sasquatch, Bill said, reflecting my own thoughts. Were those werewolf tracks? I asked. I remember Kent going over the whole wolf thing, but he was never specific as to what kind of track they left. Bill was silent for a moment. I'm not sure. Never deal with the wolf people before. Sure wasn't a Sasquatch. Wasn't human either. You saw where it slipped? That wasn't a fake print. That was a living foot. 5 minutes or so in silence. What's the plan? I somewhat hoped that he was going to say we wait and call him back up. Well, I saw what you're packing. An elephant gun and your 44. I have an AR-18 and a 45 behind you. So we got the firepower to take on a wolfie. You got some surveillance gear at the hotel. I say we go to the local store, get some tents, and go camping tomorrow. After picking up my vehicle, I drove to the hotel, dropped off the trailer, then went shopping. 2 new tents and some straps and rope, which Bill would not say were for. Some snacks, pop, an icebox, a small propane lighter. Bob even threw in a small 6-step ladder. Everything we needed for a camping trip. Back at the hotel room, I went over the 20 trail cams, made sure they were charged fully, and showed him how the 20 perimeter alarms worked. There was a separate screen about the size of an iPad that was linked to the devices. It would show the alarms and when each one was set off. They were small and came in 2 parts, the sending infrared and a reflecting mirror. Okay, looks like we have all we need. Bill said, just need to head out tomorrow. We'll keep as much of this gear hidden until we get to the site and set up. You don't trust Cajun Charlie? If we're dealing with a werewolf, then no. I don't trust anyone. I nodded in agreement. I agree. Need a bed for the night? I asked. I had 2 queen-size beds. One was loaded down with gear. Oh no, Bill replied. Got one. I had previously called down when I found out you were coming. Must have been a great Boy Scout. I said, always be prepared. Yes, well, we'll find out tomorrow night how prepared we both are. Next day, we parked by Cajun Charlie's house. As I backed up the buggy, Bill went to say hi to our newfound friend. He was going to tell him that we were going to where the first campers had been killed, set up our tents, and see what happened. If you're that anxious to die, he responded, I'll check up on you tomorrow evening and make sure you're alive. Bill nodded. That would be appreciated. Bill came over and climbed in. The six-wheeler went right into the water and we headed off. I was right in thinking that it was slower than Charlie's boat. It was an absolute snail, but it trudged onward, brown bayou water forming a wake as the wheels spun. We headed around the bend and then straight toward the police tape a mile away. We'll set up the trail cam and your perimeter alarms as quickly as we can, Bill said, then set up camp. We want everything to look like 2 unarmed campers just out to have a good time. Hide the guns in the tents. I asked. For now, later tonight, when we get set up, the guns come out. They won't do us any good if we don't have them ready. The swamp buggy went up to the bank and climbed onto the land. How far should I take the buggy in? All the way for now. Once we get it unloaded, suggest we take a rope, tie it off, and let it drift off into the water. Sounds like a plan, I said, then something else came to mind. Instead of simply tying it off with rope, we could use the winch on the front and tie it off using the wire. Be a little harder to break that way. Good thinking, Bill said with a slight laugh. Always be prepared. The buggy trundled up to the campsite. We quickly uncovered the equipment that we had in the back and storage trunk and unstrapped the ladder. I had no idea what it was for. Both the 458 and Bill's AR were stood up against the buggy. I strapped on my 44 and I saw Bill stick his 45 under his belt. Let's get the trail cams out first, Bill said. I want one set up in camp, up that black oak tree, looking down. It'll just take pictures all night. Then I paused until we get out of the picture. Once in the tents, it will stop taking pictures until something sets it off. We won't be in our tents. Bill said, we're going to be a bit further out. He pointed to the buggy. Why should it float around all by itself? Good idea. Grab some cams, Bill said as he unfastened the straps that held the ladder on the buggy. What is the ladder for? I asked as I grabbed 4 trail cams. We have to put the cams up high, he told me. Remember, we are wanting photos of something 8 feet tall, at least Sasquatch is. If we put a trail cam up at least that high and tilted slightly downward, we'll get what we want. If we don't put it higher than 8 feet, Squatcho will see it. Plus, it will at least be out of sight of the werewolf. Right. I hadn't even been thinking about the height of Sasquatch. It would be looking right at one of the trail cams, if not looking down. If I remember right, Bigfoot and trail cams didn't get along too well. They seemed to know where they were and avoided them. I wondered if they could see into the infrared. The cameras were set off by the infrared beam being broken. If that was true, then the perimeter alarms would also be seen. Well, couldn't do anything about it now. Anyway, it wasn't Bigfoot we were after. With Bill's help, I set the trail cams out, one watching the camp I put as high as I could. To get the camera tilted, I used branches behind the cams. Next went the perimeter alarms. Again, Bill helped me put 2 rings around camp. One about 50 feet out and the other 20 feet out. The perimeter screen connected to each one, showing 2 rings around a central point. We still had several ropes and straps left, and I wondered what they were for. Bill explained that he had intended for us to strap ourselves up into the trees, but decided that floating buggy would be better. Probably safer too. Then he thought a moment. Perhaps one of us should scale a tree. If something needs shot, it'd be kind of hard to hit it from the water, especially if we drift behind a tree. I'm not good with trees, I said, looking around the camp. There wasn't a tree limb low enough to reach, even with the ladder. Me either. Well, one of us can stay at 10. If we use your perimeter thingy, that will tell the person when something is coming. I was silent. What he said was true. With a distance of 50 feet, that would give some time to get closer in the buggy. With a distance of 50 feet, that would give some time to get closer in the buggy. Seemed like the best thing we could do. All right, I volunteer for the tent duty. I've got the iPad anyway. All right, I'll be in the buggy, not that far off. As soon as something pings your perimeter, text me on your cell phone if anything starts up. I'll have it set to vibrate. I nodded. It was starting to get dark, so we gathered up some wood and started the campfire. We ate in silence, listening to the forest and bayou. After a while, Bill climbed into the buggy with his AR while I wrapped the wire cable around a tree. He slowly fed the wire out, but I knew that if he toggled the switch, it would draw him back within seconds. I went back to the tents, picked the one somewhat closer to the fire, and got in. Sitting in the middle of the tent, my rifle was beside me, pistol at my side, and I set up the iPad. It shows 2 rough circles, an outer and inner perimeter. Then I waited and waited until dawn and the sun began to light the forest. I crept outside. Nothing had been disturbed, nothing touched. Over at the bayou, I heard the buggy's winch start up, and soon Bill was standing beside me. First night's watch and nothing, I said quietly. Guess we could check the trail cams and see if they picked anything up. No, Bill said as he began to go through the icebox for some food. That will just add to whatever scent we may have left. Best to leave them undisturbed. What he said made sense. Well, I can turn off the perimeter alarms. That way they'll have enough juice for the night. May have to charge them tomorrow, though. Go ahead. I'll get breakfast ready. Then he said quietly, "Should have brought a fishing pole." I turned off all of the perimeter alarms and came back to a modest breakfast of eggs, bacon, and coffee. I sat down in one of the camp chairs and ate. "So we have all day. What should we do?" "Been thinking about that." Bill said, "Bigfoot already knows we are here, I would well imagine. If he doesn't smell us, he does the fire and food. Plus, we've not been quiet. I think we can walk around during the day, see what kind of prints and things we can find. We really didn't look around much yesterday or the day before. We looked here, some in the woods where we set up the cams, but that's been it. I like to take a careful look around about 100 yards out or so, see what turns up." "The police would have already searched," I said, "farther than 100 yards. "True, but they were looking primarily for bodies, blood, whatever happened to the people. They may have missed something small, something not so small, but made no sense. If a searcher had come across that werewolf footprint, he probably would have ignored it. We know what to look for. They didn't." After breakfast, Bill and I walked together through the forest. It took a while, but we found a few more wolf prints. It looked like he was simply walking through the woods after what looked like footprints of someone. The person had been running, stumbling through the woods, the werewolf in pursuit, but slowly, like he was hunting the person. Then a blood spot. This is where the person met his end. There was a small police flag there, indicating that they had noted this as evidence. As Bill and I continued, we found the same pattern repeated through the wood. He was playing with them. I finally said, "Hunting them down." "Sport," Bill said. It knew where each person was. They were panicked, running for their lives, and he was patiently hunting them down. But what did he do with the bodies? "Bury them," I suggested. "Dump them in the swamps." Bill paused, and he looked around slowly. "I don't think so," he said somewhat quietly. I started to turn around, but Bill stopped me. "Slowly," he said. I turned slowly, as if looking for something, which I was. Then I felt it. It was the kind of feeling that you really can't describe unless it happens to you. We were being watched. I saw nothing, but the feeling didn't go away. "There is something out there," he said quietly. "I think a Sasquatch is watching us. Let's keep looking around for a while. If it wants us, it'll come out." We continued and found where all 5 people had been killed. No bodies. However, in one spot, it looked like one had been dragged, and then the signs were gone. "He picked up the bodies," I commented, "carried them off. Probably has them in a freezer." "They like fresh meat," Bill replied. "I can see why the police classified this as a bear. Bears tend to bury their kills. Without knowing what they were really facing, I imagine they thought some bear killed these people and buried the body somewhere. But how do we know that our local Bigfoot had nothing to do with this? Sasquatch are meat eaters when they get the chance, but nothing like this. Plus, I've not seen any Sasquatch prints anywhere. No, it's a werewolf, and I think I know who it is." "Charlie?" I was thinking the same thing. "Guess we'll find out this evening when he comes by and see if we're still alive." Bill nodded. He paused again. "I think our friend is gone," he said quietly, "at least for now." "Just curious?" "Probably. It wasn't threatening, that's for sure." We made our way back to camp. Bill suggested that we build a sort of fence around the camp. There was plenty of dead trees, and it seemed like an idea. Plan on only a couple of ways to easily get into the camp. One was the way we came in, one entry for the buggy, and one toward the rear. The rest would be wooded up as best as we could. It was about 6 or so in the evening when we heard a call in the distance. "Hello in the camp." "Charlie," Bill said, "quick, hide all the guns in the first tent." Bill pulled his .45 out but put in his shirt. The AR, 458 and 44 went into the tent. I still have my 9mm strapped to my ankle. Come on in, Charlie, Bill called out. Make sure you don't say anything about the cameras or perimeter alarms. The less he knows, the better. I nodded in understanding as Charlie walked into camp. He was in jeans and a t-shirt and looked genuinely relieved that we were alive. Looks like you should have brought a fishing pole or two, he said in good humor. Glad to see you both are okay. Nothing interesting last night. No, all quiet, Bill said, although I do wish we had brought some poles. Charlie looked around the camp, noticing our makeshift fence. Been busy though, hoping to keep something out, looks like. Well, you never know, I said. Care to stay for dinner? Charlie walked over to the fence we had built. He turned back to us. Sounds good. Let me go tie up my boat a bit better, and I'll be back. Charlie left the camp. What do you think? I asked Bill. Not sure. He did seem concerned, but that could have just been an act. Regardless, I think it best that we don't show or tell him everything. I nodded as I opened the icebox to get some hot dogs and drinks. Bill was on the far side of the camp, by where Charlie had left. I thought after we got rid of Charlie, I'd go around and turn on the perimeter alarms before it got too dark. Suddenly, Bill goes flying through the air. He hit the ground, not moving. I spin around, and there in the camp is a hairy creature full of teeth and claws. It's crouched down a little, but was close to 6 feet tall. It was covered in dark brown hair, on 2 legs, and had a definite canine muzzle. It looked at me with reddish eyes and snarled. I admit I was frozen in fear. I reached for the pistol that wasn't there. I glanced at Bill. He didn't seem to be bleeding from any places, but I was pretty sure he wasn't getting up anytime soon. I looked back at the creature. It hadn't moved, but was looking at me. Then it did something. It nodded toward the back of the camp, as if telling me to run. Right? It wanted me to run. I remember the campers. It wanted me to run so it could hunt me down. Without anything but my 9mm, I had little choice. If I could get ahead of it and circle back around, I could get the guns. All I had to do was keep my head. So I turned and ran. I managed to make a few yards and look back. The werewolf had just started walking toward me. It was completely ignoring Bill, probably thinking he was dead. I hope not. I turned back and began to run through the wood. I was slowly trying to make my way around the camp, a wide circle that would take me back to the front of the camp. Finally, I had to stop and catch my breath. I reached down and grabbed my 9mm. It wasn't much, but it was all I had. I looked around. There was just enough sunlight left that I could tell I was lost in the forest. I could barely make anything out. Then I started to smell something. Kind of like wet dog, only much worse. I started to turn to run again and tripped over a root. At the same time, my pistol had tumbled to the ground out of my reach. As I tried to move and claw for it, there was a sound behind me. I looked and saw the werewolf, not 3 feet away. Charlie, I said, you don't need to do this. The werewolf slowly walked up towards me. It growled down at me, as though disappointed. It stretched back and let out a howl. It gave me a toothy grin, and I was ready to die. There was nothing I could do. Before it attacked, it froze and then began to struggle as a huge shape moved behind it, throat in its grasp. I looked up and up. Standing beside the tree with a struggling werewolf in its hand was a Sasquatch. It was huge, over 8 feet, hairy, human-like, and smelled. Right now, I didn't care what it smelled like. The werewolf couldn't move It was held by the back of the neck. Without any weight, the Sasquatch smashed the werewolf's head against the tree. I heard a slight crunch as the creature smashed it again and again against the tree. The crunching turned into a squish before the body was dropped. The werewolf's head was completely crushed. I waited a minute to see what the Sasquatch would do to me. It stood back a little, but did nothing else but look at me. I slowly stood, my head coming to the creature's chest. I started to speak, thought a moment. It probably wouldn't understand me, but it had saved me. I don't know if you can understand, but you just saved my. But then I spoke with full and complete honesty. Thank you. The Sasquatch stood there. It didn't say anything. We stood staring at each other. Then it did something I will never forget. It grunted what I can only call a laugh. It stretched an arm out and pointed back behind the werewolf. I presume it was toward the camp. The creature then turned, kicked the werewolf carcass, and left. I stood for long moments not moving. I picked up my pistol and went back the way the Sasquatch had pointed. It didn't take long for me to get back. Bill was sitting on the icebox, the AR cradled in his hands. I walked over to him. How you doing? Bruised arm. Not broken, but it hurts like hell. He looked me over. I didn't hear any shots. What happened to Fong Face? You won't believe me, I said, but the Sasquatch killed it. Bill's eyes bulged a little. Do what? I explained what happened, even the laugh that Bigfoot made. Seems we've underestimated the intelligence of Sasquatch, Bill said. I nodded. Looks like we underestimated Charlie a little bit. Neither one of us was ready for him. True, Bill said. We didn't even get to roast any hot dogs. The next morning, I took down all of the trail cams and perimeter alarms, which I had not turned back on. Everything went into the buggy. We decided to leave Charlie's boat where it was. We both walked to where the werewolf was killed and found Charlie's body. Nude and basically no head. He was quite dead. Bigfoot tracks could be seen here and there, but Bill and I erased them. Once back to town, Bill left to talk to the sheriff. He was back at about 3. We both sat at a restaurant across the way, and Bill told me the breakdown. It took a little while to get the sheriff to believe me, but a final call to Kent straightened things out. We went out to the marina and took the sheriff's boat out to the campground while his men went to Charlie's house. Charlie was where we left him, had all bashed in. I told the sheriff quite plainly what you told me. Of course, he didn't believe me until his men discovered 2 freezer chests that were full of arms, legs, and a few other body parts. The missing people and a few others that no one knew about. That's when the sheriff decided to keep his mouth shut, blamed Charlie for the missing people, a Jeffrey Dahmer of the bayou. He leaned back in his seat as the food we had ordered came. There was no need to get you all tied into this mess. So, everything straight, the news will have a field day reporting the local cannibal, and that's that. Kent did say you could take a couple of days off, but he wants the trail cams as soon as possible. It was early the next day, everything loaded, and Bill and I parted company. You did good, kid, he said. Next time you're in the area, let me know and we'll have a fish fry and some crab. Once back at headquarters, I dropped off the trailer, rifle, pistol, and of course the trail cams. I took the next day off, but that was it. I was ready to find out what the trail cams showed, if anything. I drove in and spoke to a relieved Kent. After a handshake, he loaded up the images from the cams. It seems that the first night you and Bill camped, one trail cam picked up an image. He called it up on the big TV. It was a hairy arm. This was the first image. an arm. We figured that the Sasquatch was walking. The cam took a photo and scared him off. The next few were made the next day when apparently you and Bill were walking around. Several photos of you two, but here, something looking at you in the distance. Even with picture enhancement, it's way out of focus. The picture showed Bill and I in the woods and some dark shape behind a distant tree. It was definitely watching you two. Then came your encounter with the werewolf. We have excellent footage of the whole event. The TV showed Charlie coming into camp, walking to the makeshift fence, walking out of sight, and then he stripped. He turned into a werewolf within a couple of minutes, human becoming the creature. Strolling back into camp, hitting Bill, and then hunting me through the wood. It showed our confrontation and stopped. Now, this is where it gets interesting. Your other trail cams show Bigfoot sneaking up behind the werewolf and then killing it, Kent said as the picture started back up. It seems that the Sasquatch have been waiting for such an event. Here is where it's pointing back to your camp and walking off. The trail cam next showed the Sasquatch walking through the forest and then stopped. We both watched as the creature turned and looked up and directly into the last trail cam. It stood for a long moment, staring at the camera. It formed a slight smile, then went on into the woods and out of camera frame. Seems like we need to update our Sasquatch file, Kent finally said after we both sat there in silence. They definitely are smarter and more aware than we thought. Glad they are, I said, sure saved my butt. Kent laughed a little. Not too bad for your second mission. Could have been a lot worse. Bill was a lot of help. He had good things to say about you. It was a tough assignment. He leaned back in his chair. So you want a day off? Or two? Sound good to me if you don't have anything at the moment. Kent smiled. We almost always have something. I still have investigators looking into this, but how about a trip to New York?